The NeoSTEM ecosystem is pleased to bring you this webinar featuring area education leaders talking about how the community can best support students, families, and educators during the 2020 to 2021 school year. Please visit www.neostem.org for more resources and information about how diverse partners are pulling together to support learning in these challenging times.
Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar organized by the NeoSTEM ecosystem. Some of you may not know about the NeoSTEM ecosystem, and while I don't want to spend a lot of time filling you in about it right now, I will tell you that today's webinar is a prime example of what the NeoSTEM ecosystem does. As part of a network of 89 regional ecosystems around the world, NeoSTEM sees challenges and opportunities and tries to bring together partners to create meaningful STEM learning opportunities for all.
I would say that as we've looked at the needs of our kids and our families, we feel like we've tackled some of those needs. We have a food plan in place for kids who rely on lunches and breakfast. We have been working on getting one-to-one technology and hotspots in place in a longer term internet connectivity. But there's a couple of needs, one very practical and tactical and one that's more adaptive. The first is, and it's particularly useful to have so many people here who are out of school time providers, we need safe places for young people to be during the school day while school is not open. And so whether that be in our museums or our libraries or our Boys and Girls Clubs, or all the people that are here, Cal's on here today, to the extent you're able to, we're going to have care needs for families where the family needs a safe place for their child to be since we can't have them in school. And that's a very practical thing that our Northeast Ohio out of school time providers can provide. The second one is, I would argue, even more important and not talked about enough, and it's the adaptive of helping families move through this. And so we have been really clear in our planning that we want families to understand that all we're asking is that they do what they can and be great parents and not try to suddenly replace teaching by being the teacher. If all they can do is get their child's homework in that day, great, we'll take it. If they can read with their child in another day, fantastic, that'd be great. Connected to that, we want to remind our families, and again, out of school time providers can do this so well, of how the whole world is a learning environment and all of the many ways that the daily things we do, cooking or walking around the house and counting things or going outside, that there's so many places that learning can occur in authentic ways. And so helping families keep that top of mind. Then finally, making sure families know that there's no shame in asking for help. There are lots of help resources in our community. This is a very generous community, and we want to make sure that when people are feeling stressed or they don't have basic needs or any of those kinds of things, that they have ample ways to seek the support they need. And so
we were fortunate enough in Twinsburg that we were already moving toward a one-to-one model. So from a technology standpoint, we were already well along our way, so that students were already taking Chromebooks home and doing work online. So that transition wasn't as difficult. However, when you look at the staff and the teachers, there's still a need to continue to build capacity in order to use that platform as a way of teaching. I mean, obviously it's different than being in a traditional brick and mortar classroom, right? Using Google Classroom as our primary means of delivering instruction. There was a lot of PD and planning that went into preparing our teachers. Now, that being said, when we planned for the fall, and there was more guidance that came out from the governor's office, from the state health department, from our own Summit County health department. And so that allowed us to kind of look at what our capacity was to do in-person learning and also remote learning. And so what Twinsburg has done is we've kind of done a hybrid of both. We've looked at the capacity, and I'm talking like classrooms. We literally had staff go into every classroom and measure every classroom for purposes of 6-foot social distancing. And determine the number of students and staff that we could accommodate in any given space at any given time. We then looked at our grade levels and our grade bands and looked from a priority standpoint, who would be the most important that we consider that we should definitely be doing some in-person teaching and learning. One of the things that we also did was we sent out surveys to our families, collecting information and data that would be important in formulating a district-wide plan for the fall. We also work with our bargaining units and all of our staff because we recognize that none of this can happen without all of the individuals that work in the school district. We all have to be invested in doing this and in formulating the plan. First and foremost was safety and the well-being of students and staff. We wanted to make sure that we can ensure to the best that we could, based on the guidance that we had, that we're doing everything possible to make sure that all of our students are safe and all of our staff are safe. So the entire approach, I mean, it's very thoughtful, time-consuming, but at the end of the day, and I'm sure most of my colleagues in districts will agree, it's not a situation we're going to be able to please everybody. We do the best that we possibly can do, but one of the things that we ultimately want to ensure that we are as flexible as possible with our families and understanding what their needs are and doing as much as we can to meet their needs. Education typically changes, and it's usually research-based. It's all driven by the research, and we adapt our instructional practices based on the research. Well, we're now in a situation where we haven't made a shift this significant in 100 years. It's truly a huge paradigm shift. And so I did that, and I said that to impress upon people just how much of a lift this is, and that we're educators. We're not epidemiologists, we're not doctors, we're not nurses. So we're doing the best that we can with what we have, with the best intentions at heart. And so I just always want to remind our readers, our people that are watching, our families, that school districts are in uncharted territory, and we continue to be, even though we know more than we did when we first started the initial shutdown.
One of the things that I think could really be very helpful is to have a resource bank. And when I say a resource bank, I mean, for example, for libraries, for example, with a library. And I know libraries have a lot of resources, but I think with the new school season starting back up, if they could have a place on their website that's very noticeable, very easy access for students and maybe parents, maybe a button that says something like resources for students, but something very noticeable that parents could go to, that teachers could go to, students could go to, where they could get support for classes that they're taking. Another thing that I think would be very helpful is a very well vetted tutor resource. So if you have the names of tutors on a website, of course, as I said, vetted, that parents or teachers or even educators could go to and see who could also offer assistance with students. I think churches can be very instrumental in helping. Maybe there's someone within the church or synagogue that has expertise in different subject matters, then they could help students, whether it's Saturday or Sunday. The church would work that out where they can help students with different classes. And also not just the subjects like math, science, English language arts, but also soft skills, because I think those often are left out. So students need to know the importance of communication skills, listening skills, time management skills, and they are so important with what's going on now. Students have been kind of out of the loop in a way with, not on a schedule. I'm kind of talking about my own kids. So I think it would be really good with if there could be some resources out there to talk about the importance of time management.
What we really need right now is, for those who don't know, MyCOM is a network that services over 31 communities in Greater Cleveland. And our main focus is making sure that we connect young people to positive opportunities throughout the Greater Cleveland area. So around May, we sent out a survey, and by all means, we don't know every provider out there. We only know those that are in our networks. We're very open to people communicating with us after this meeting. But at any rate, we sent out a survey to say, should schools not come back in the fall, would you be willing to open up your facility, or do you know how you could service young people? And at that time, we got a little over 70 responses, and about 70% said they would. So that was in May, which was good. So as the summer went on, we stayed in communication with those partners, and then we followed up with them very recently to say, okay, well, now that we know the majority of the schools are not going to be in service, what can you offer? And we only sent that out within the last week. And it made people kind of nervous, because we told them in the realm of, you know, do you need additional staffing? Because we recognize kids, those out of school partners often do services 2:30 to 7, 2:30 to 5. Now we're saying, hey, can you house young people during the day? Because we recognize that some young people are going to need supervision, warm, safe, and dry environments. So we've been getting a steady flow of respondents. As of today, we have about 30. And in that, we asked, what would that look like for cost? Because while MyCOM doesn't have an infinite amount of resources, we are in a position where we can do some funding support for those who are able to provide structured programming. And when we say structured, we mean those that have demonstrated that they have staffing, that you have a safe space. But we are really in need of finding additional partners. Well, when you have a district, not just of CMSD, because MyCOM is throughout Northeast Ohio, we're looking at 50, 60,000 kids. So 780 from the respondents that I have barely touches the surface, but it's a start. So what we really could use from MyCOM is to get some additional partners within our network so that we can start to see who has what. We've partnered with faith-based organizations, and we found that it's really a technology for them. A lot of them don't have, you know, very strong Wi-Fi because they don't really need it. They don't have a lot of technology. So us looking to say, if you can house 27 kids, which would be 9, 9, and 9 plus one adult, what would the technology needs be? What would that cost? And we're looking at figuring out ways that we can expand that. So our need right now is to reach out to us and say, this is something that I can do. This is how frequently. And right now we've had people say, I can do 2 days a week. I can do 4 days a week. I can do 3 days a week. Any amount of time is better than nothing. So we're trying to work with all types of schedules, and we're trying to make sure that we have a lot of opportunities available for not just the young people, but our older young people as well. So in a nutshell, what we could do for MyCOM is, if you have availability, reach out to us, and I'll send you the survey. I'll send you what we're looking for, and we can bring you into our network so we can start to find safe places for our young people who are really going to need that, especially those that are neighborhood-based, because we recognize transportation is a barrier. So we're trying to find places in home neighborhoods that young people can get to safely. So that is what we are looking for MyCOM.
You know, the saying, it takes a village, you know, to raise a child. And I think that statement can't be more true in this situation that we're in now.
And increasingly, we're being treated as if we're clinicians who can do this very deep intervention, with this notion that somehow all of our kids are broken. Our kids are not broken. They're resilient, wonderful, flexible young people. And so we have to lift up their assets. You know, it doesn't mean they haven't experienced trauma, but it's how we heal from our trauma, not that we had a trauma. Right? It doesn't mean that, you know, that they've lost learning. Everybody keeps saying lost learning. We lost time to learn. We didn't lose the ability to learn. And so Cynthia's going to go right back in her classroom and pick up where they left off and teach them. But we have to send a message, particularly in communities like mine, that serve 100% poverty, 86% people of color, that our kids aren't broken. They're resilient, wonderful young people that are going to be a renaissance coming out of this. And we have to enter with that attitude so that we bring their assets to the solution instead of always treating as if there's a new deficit that we're supposed to fix.
So it forces us to recognize where our deficiencies are, recognize that there's a serious digital divide that needs to be addressed, and that requires funding. That requires cooperation at the federal level. It requires cooperation at the state level. We recognize now that if learning is the real priority here, then what we don't need is testing, more testing. What we don't need is mandates. These are things that are an impediment to our ability to really engage our students in learning. So I would suggest from an equity standpoint that we look at it for what it is. And these are deficits that have always been there, but now that we have to deal with them, then we need to deal with them in a real way. And that means stepping up to the plate and providing the resources that are necessary so that we do truly level the playing field, that all kids have access to what they need to do what they need to do. We talk about the equity issue. One of the issues has to do with, I think in every community you have families that don't have internet and don't have Wi-Fi. We've worked with providers. I think providers have done a good job in trying to bring things to the forefront that are less expensive, in some cases free for a certain stretch of time. I would encourage that if you have access to things like that, any district, especially in Twinsburg and also Maple Heights, we definitely need that. Also, social emotional is definitely at the forefront. We were fortunate enough that we hired a director of student wellness when the social emotional learning standards came out. So we do have leadership in that area, but not every district does. So it would be important to lean on some of our social service agencies that might be able to step up and provide some wraparound services to our families. And the last thing that I would add is that PPE, you can never have enough of that.
The other thing is, don't miss the racial justice moment that we're in. There's a lot of talk. We're the fourth worst connected city in the country for internet. There's a lot of talk about short-term solutions and not enough talk about making it a public utility. So as you're designing your solutions and as you're advocating and poking my system and pushing us to be different, keep challenging that we can come out of this as a more fair, just, and good system if we keep our eye on the bigger problem, which is the racial injustice that have been in this country longer than COVID, and using this moment to design towards something better. So keep innovating and innovate toward good.
Thank you for listening to what was a webinar sponsored by the NeoSTEM ecosystem. Now, we'd like to invite you to take next steps and come forward with what you have to offer. Please visit us at www.neostem.org. That's www.neostem.org to learn about the many possible ways you can support students, families, and educators this coming school year.